Hey guys, my name's Jeff, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 Kia EV9. And I'm here with James Cox, who is the Senior Sales Representative of Courtesy Kia, who are the first in Arizona to get the brand new EV9. Now, James, would you mind telling us a little bit about the EV9?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Our 2024 EV9 is a great option for those of you looking to go that full electric route. They start at about roughly $55,000 and work their way up to about $75,000, but there is a $7,500 rebate that is available if you do lease with a different purchase option as well. Behind me is going to be the Light long range drive, which is going to be our biggest battery on the EV9. It's a dual motor 99.4 kilowatt battery that gets about 304 miles of range. It is available today here at Courtesy Kia. I'm James Cox, Senior Sales Representative. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, James. And with that, let's go ahead and get into the video. So moving on to the exterior of the Kia EV9. First of all, this particular car happens to be finished in Snow White Pearl, which is this really pretty, it's got some metallic flake into it. Even looks like it may be a little bit of blue that's mixed in there as well, but it's a really pretty color. And one of the interesting part about the colors that are actually available for the Kia EV9 is it actually varies by trim. So the lower trim levels, in this case, this being the Light long range, is a limited color option, about 4 colors or so, but as you move up the range, get into the dual motors and even the higher level trims, you actually get more color options. So that's similar to like what you would find at Apple in terms of iPhones, or Toyota with the TRD Pro colors. Now, taking a look at it, obviously, it looks quite a bit like the Telluride. I think you'd be mistaken not to compare to the two vehicles, as of course they are both three-row SUVs, and the fact that it is sort of Kia's staple SUV in a sense with the Telluride. But taking a look at this vehicle here, we have really good styling. I like the way it looks. It has a fairly bulky shape to it as well, including some really cool EV features that we have when you unlock the vehicle or get close to it. Even with the proximity, the mirrors will open up and the door handles extend, which means while you're driving and the vehicle's locked, everything moves in except for the mirrors, obviously, and that gives you a fairly sleek profile, which is a very modern, very cool thing that is, of course, reserved for significantly more expensive vehicles, but it can even be found on the more remarkably, relatively speaking, affordable Kia EV9. Looking at the front, we have our KN logo, which of course is the brand new Kia logo. It's actually supposed to say Kia, but most people generally confuse it for KN, therefore leading to a large amount of Google searches for the car company called KN, which doesn't exist because it's Kia. But anyways, moving on. Obviously, we don't have a grille here despite being based on it because it's an EV, so it doesn't need it. We do have LED lighting, which looks very suave across the front here, including some very nice vents that looks like pseudo vents, but of course, EV, so it doesn't really need it. And of course, some of our parking sensors and various things. Now, with our key here, we can open up basically everything on the car with a touch of a button. In this case, we also get access to the front boot. So if I go ahead and hold this button here on the remote, it pops open the trunk. And one of the cool things is there's not actually a hardcore latch there. By opening the trunk, it's releasing all of the extra latches, and therefore you can just pick it up in one fell swoop, and that gives you access to your 1.8 cubic feet of cargo space down here, which can hold up to 85 pounds as well. Obviously, there's not a ton of space up here in the frunk, but that's to be expected because it's obviously going to be where they're putting a lot of the batteries. So you're limited in space, but you still get your rear hatch as long as the interior cargo compartment as well for more storage. So putting this down and moving across the car here, as we come around to the side, we have this black cladding. Now, obviously, this black plastic is getting more and more common on various vehicles that tend to look like various off-road pieces because, of course, you'd rather have your rocks hit your black plastic a little bit cheaper and easier to replace than as opposed to having to repaint the car if it was to hit there. One of the interesting parts about that trim is the fact that it actually changes based on what trim level you have. So in this case, it's actually this matte black plastic, but as you go higher up, the entry-level dual motor is still matte black, but once you get into the top two dual motors, these actually turn to gloss black. So if you ever wanted to determine what range or what trim level of Kia, you could use that to tell. So the lowers will have the matte and the higher level trims have the gloss black trim. So you'll notice some styling differences as well, whether they look depending on that. So you'll never see, for example, some of that really cool ocean blue color that gets used in a lot of marketing. You'll never see that color with the matte black fenders. You'll only ever see it with the gloss black fenders. So that's an interesting thing to think about when you're looking at various Kia EV9s as you see these on the road. Now below that we have these 4-spoke wheels. They actually have a variety of different 4-spoke wheels depending on what you're looking at on the vehicle. And 4-spoke wheels can be kind of interesting depending on what vehicle it is. It could be a little bit wonky. These actually look pretty good in my opinion. I think they have a cool futuristic forward motion look to them. They happen to be 19s on this car, and they just kind of present it really well in terms of giving it that futuristic style. All EVs have this forward-looking futuristic style that all kind of blends together at some point. Now obviously from the side, very much looks like a Telluride as well with the various bits. We don't have any roof rails on this car at the moment, but you can see it's even got a color-keyed shark match fender. We have these black gloss rails between the windows here, which actually give it this super clean look, similar to what you'd find on a lot of luxury cars. Range Rovers tend to do that as well. And then we actually have soundproof glass on the exterior of the vehicle, which also depends on how much soundproof glass you get. Also depends on trim level as well, but it does make up for it in terms of the overall sound quality, which I'll talk more about later. As we move through the car, we have our door handles and our mirrors, which of course pop out as you need them to, and it's fairly easy. They're also proximity based, or you can of course unlock the key and that'll adjust everything as well. So move to the back, we have this cool boxy fender flare as well that tends to stick out. Your charger is going to be on the passenger side, and then we get to the rear, we have a color keyed spoiler that also has some black into it as well, along with our various Kia EV9 badging, and a hatch which can also be opened up via the key, which is a pretty easy touch as well. So with that, it's a quick look at the exterior of the Kia EV9, and now hop in the interior and see what's going on in there. Okay, so now we're moving on to the interior of the Kia EV9. Now it feels like a fairly tall seating position, but of course that can be adjusted with your powered seats here. But you have a variety of very cool controls. It feels very premium, but also keeps that sort of EV minimalistic styling, let's say, to it that carries on throughout some of the various cars that exist in this range. But we have a lot of cool stuff going on, including obviously these two 12.3-inch displays, which are obviously focused at the driver. One is the instrument panel here on the left, and then we of course have the center display, and they just have to be pseudo connected, though there is a bar down the middle that sort of separates them, but you get this cool panoramic feel to it as it sort of spreads out the car. You have a lot of cool textures as everything is finished in the vehicle, which makes it feel very premium amongst other things, not to mention the pseudo design aspect that went into a lot of this car. But there's also a lot of cool functionality, a lot of new things that may be new or jarring at first, but are things that you would get used to with using the car. So first of all, we have this instrument display. And obviously this is a very simple display. Obviously with an EV you don't need lots of extra gauges, so this does just what it needs to in things of displaying your speed, or even some of your trip information, vehicle information, any of your safety assists or vehicle driving assists. All that stuff is generally displayed on the instrument, as opposed to the center console, which of course is managing everything. So this console of course has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is basically standard these days, but it also has a lot of your navigation and Kia things that you would expect, like the Bluetooth connections, and of course. And one of the cool things I like about the way that everything's sort of designed is there's a lot of cool touches that have been integrated as well. So just below the center display, we actually have these words printed on here, and it looks like they're not actually buttons. They're just kind of words printed on here, but they all function. So as you touch, you can actually move through everything, and it has like a tactile feedback to it as you touch the buttons, which I think is kind of a nice touch. And you have what is a fairly easy to use touchscreen as well, if you didn't want to use the sort of physical but not physical buttons, but still have tactile feedback. You also have these cool scroll bars that also doubles as your power button for things, but then you also have your hazard lights and various displays, your temperature control, all that type of stuff that's all tucked in here. Very nice, very easy to use, that everything's just so accessible to you, and even has these vents that are nicely integrated but very wide in the car as well. Below that, we do have some more of our charging stuff. We actually have some USB chargers, and one of the cool parts is that while some chargers you plug in your phone and then it messes up your music, can be kind of annoying if your passenger plugs in this case you can actually push a button, and that button switches between just the battery mode or battery and charge, like connecting to the car, which is a pretty cool, and it actually changes the colors too, so you can physically see at a quick glance which mode it's actually in. So I think that's a pretty cool feature they didn't have to add, but it is in there nonetheless. Moving on, we have some storage down below. Again, tons of benefits here. There's no transmission components that you need to hide anywhere in the center, so there's just nothing but storage that you'll find in these various components, including some cup holders here. And then as we move back here, we have some other bits as well, like hill descent control, which is nice if you wanted to take this off-roading, but I imagine most people will not take it off-roading. You also have access to a lot of your camera controls as well, so you can see out of your back camera, which is fairly nice at the touch of a button. You don't necessarily have to have the car in reverse. It's always nice to have have that, never hurts. Easy access buttons to turn off your parking sensors, although I would always recommend keeping those on. And then we actually have a wireless charger that's nicely here in the middle. Sometimes manufacturers take those wireless chargers and they hide them in weird spots of the car, but that's not the case here. It's right in the center, easy to access, and of course, you can keep your phone charged up that way, and you got some storage as well. So go ahead and put that down, and we have some cup holders in the back along with some other various adjustments for the driver. And one of the things that I want to point out is these seats are actually really comfortable. They're almost like pseudo couches, dare I describe them, with super comfortable headrests. They have these sort of like springy nets to them that feel like some office chairs, and it's actually quite comfortable. I like the headrest a lot. That is obviously something you'll have to determine for your personal preference, but I really like the way they happen to set this up back here. Now moving on, let's talk about even some of these steering wheel controls. So we have this almost a square steering wheel, but still has the full circle around it, which is great if you're going to be parking. Everybody knows that some of those weird yoke steering wheels that exist are not great if you're going to be parking, parallel parking. You need to be able to go all the way around the wheel, but you've got a full wheel here in the Kia, which is great, along with some paddle shifters if you wanted to be a little bit more sporty with your driving, although it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in a car that doesn't have gears. That being said, the car does have a variety of drive modes as well, which can be adjusted using this button at the bottom of the steering wheel. So of course you have your normal modes, you do have your eco modes where the car is going to help limit your throttle and things like that to help preserve battery charge, but then you also have the sport mode, so if you want to go a bit faster, and then you even have a snow mode as well to help kind of with some of that, although the all-wheel drive modes, the all-wheel drive trim levels make a bit more sense to me. If you were going to be living in a snow area, you should really leap for the all-wheel drive, because that's really what's going to make more of a difference rather than changing the traction control of your rear-wheel drive car. So all things to keep in mind there. You do have quite a bit of battery of wheel controls, excuse me, that are available here. This one being the lower light trim model does not have the front lit steering wheel that you'll find in other models, but you do get a lot of your easy access stuff, all of your various controls for volume, mode, all of that, including your different driving assists, lane assist, which is actually fairly decent on this car, along with a variety of other bits, things that you would want to manage on the steering wheel essentially while you're driving are all readily available, including some of the voice control options. Now on top of that, you have some really cool features that include things like being able to talk to the rear passengers. So there's actually an intercom system that allows you to talk to the people in the back in case they can't hear you, which could be kind of a nice touch, but the interior is so quiet with all of the soundproof glass anyways that it really shouldn't be that big of a deal to talk to the people that are sitting in the back of the car. One of the interesting things that I wanted to point out, which isn't a big deal, it's just different, is this turnkey, the actual stock for how you change your drive mode. So obviously with EVs, they can do almost whatever they want for their drive engagement stocks because they don't have traditional systems for how they do that. They're basically just telling an electric motor whether you want to go forwards or backwards, etc. And so in this instance, we have this little turn signal stock that sits just below the wiper stock, and that has your power button in addition to all of your drive modes. And so you actually twist it when you want to get into your various drive modes. You can put it in drive, or you can put it in park by touching this button on the end here. And that may seem weird at first, but that's something that you'll get basically used to almost immediately. And I can say just from using it here already, it's super easy to use. It's super functional. It really just makes sense because it's something that you can do instantaneously and don't even have to worry about it. On top of that, in case you wanted to use some of this tech even when you're not in the car, fortunately with the Kia app, you can also do some of the heating and cooling elements. Let's say you're coming out of the airport and it's cold or hot in the car and you want to preheat it or pre-cool it. You can do that with the EV9 as well. So that's a quick look at a lot of the things that are going on here. Obviously, you have lots of different technology, but everything is also set up in such a relaxed way. Heated, ventilated seats that are all, of course, all to be expected. All the luxury amenities. The Kia EV9 doesn't make any sacrifices, but still manages to come in at a lower price point, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, you still get your auto-dimming mirrors, Kia Connect, all the various bits. You can even pop everything, all the buttons in the front here for the trunk and the rear trunk, I should say, or the hatch. Everything just makes sense. It's super easy to use, super easy to see out of. It's really just a fantastic blend. But now I think we should hop in the back seat and see what's going on in there. Okay, so now we're sitting in the second row of the Kia EV9, and there's actually a ton of space. The headroom is fantastic. I'm about 6 foot for reference. As you can see, I have plenty of room back here. And now this one does have some different features. As you move along the different trims, you'll find that they have different things like, you know, different center console bits and things like that, but there's nothing here, so you can actually walk right into the third row if you wanted to, which in itself isn't the biggest, but it is bigger than a lot of the other EV competitors that are in the 3-row market, such as the Tesla Model Y or the Mustang Mach-E. Those don't have real third rows like this does. You can actually fit adults back there if you wanted to. Wouldn't recommend it for long trips, but definitely have no problem with putting kids back there. Now, some of the other amenities, we actually get some AC vents back here as well, including our third zone climate control. So the people in the second row can actually control AC for everybody back here, and you even get vents in the third row. So that's super nice. That means you're going to have a great quality of life while riding in the back of this car as well. Not to mention some of the other features, like you actually have the noise active control mode where it actually moves all the sound to the front of the car. So if you have people sleeping in the second and third row, it actually shuts down the music so they can sleep in peace if you wanted to do that. So it's kind of a fun feature, something Kia didn't have to add, but they decided to. You also get some chargers that are kind of hidden in these seats here, so they're kind of right in front of you. You do have some cup holders at the back for the rear, including a little cubby hole back here. So fairly simple but very functional rear interior, and obviously there's plenty of space in here, one of the many benefits that comes with the EV platforms that tend to leave more space to do more with the vehicle. So in which case, this is a super comfortable platform and everything can be adjusted and moved around or even folded flat if you decided you just want to use the entirety of the space. But that's a quick look at the second row. Some mentions about the third row, which I'm not going to climb into, but just so you know, you can fit adults back there. And of course, now I think it's time that we go ahead and talk about the powertrain. So the Kia EV9 is available with two different powertrains. You have both a single motor version, of course, also gives the EV9 all-wheel drive, but there are different benefits to which package you decide to go with, not counting just price. So the base model, which is the Light, that's going to be a single motor with a smaller battery pack. It's the only one that gets the smaller battery pack. Once you move up to this one, which is the long range, you get a bigger battery pack that then is also shared with the dual motor versions of the EV9. But here's where it gets kind of cool and kind of determines which trim level you decide that you want to buy. The long range gets the bigger battery pack, but because it's only a single motor, that means that it actually has a longer range of about 304 miles versus the dual motors, which also have the bigger battery, but because they have two motors, are going to be using more power and thus have a range of about 280 miles. Where it also changes is obviously you make a power difference. So the single motor version in this case makes about 201 horsepower versus the bigger 379 horsepower that you get with the all-wheel drive. So what that means is you also get a variety of towing experiences and even 0 to 60 times, with the fastest being 0 to 60 in just 5 seconds for a vehicle. Pounds. That's very impressive with the boost mode on. On top of that, you also have varying capabilities that come with the drive modes. Obviously, if you live in a snowy area where your terrain might differ, you're going to want to go with that all-wheel drive version, which means you have to step into that dual motor version for some of those differences. If range is the only thing that matters to you, then the long range, the Light long range, is cheaper than the dual motors, but has longer range as determine that. Even with towing capacities, the single motor versions aren't quite as high. If you go to the top of the dual motors, you can get as much as a 5,000-pound towing on par with what you'll find with a lot of the other 3-row SUVs, gas models included. So a pretty impressive EV and 3-row SUV at that. Plus, the top speed, that acceleration makes it one of the faster vehicles that you'll find for a 3-row SUV. Not that that's the reason that you're interested in buying one of those, but something to keep in mind. Okay, so what's it like to drive the Kia EV9? So first of all, it is incredibly quiet in here. The soundproofing glass and just extra effort that's gone in to make this vehicle feel so luxurious goes a lot to speak for the quality and the feel of the vehicle. It's actually incredible. This is definitely on par with a lot of luxury brands, and it's a really, really impressive vehicle for what they managed to do, especially to still bring it in at this price point. Now, granted, a lot of EVs still tend to be more expensive. So we'll take it on the freeway here, put it into sport mode, and then give it a go. Oh, it picks up so quickly and so quietly. Obviously, a perk of EV vehicles would be the fact that you have this very subtle, very quiet, instant torque around them that makes them very impressive, not just as performance vehicles, but just as general driving capability vehicles, and makes it a pleasure to drive at that. Honestly, as far as the steering goes, it's what you would expect from an electric vehicle. There's not like this overly engaging side of it, but it's really easy to drive. The visibility feels really good. You have what feels like a really high up. It's still definitely an SUV, but it feels taller than usual is almost how I would would describe the general driving experience. Everything's really easy to see though, including being able to see your speed, which obviously some of the higher trim levels make it even easier by having things like a heads-up display, which helps a lot as far as depending, maybe what trim level you get might also be determined by that. If you were thinking about saving some money, there are certain options because every trim changes so much on this car depending on what you opt to go for, that could really affect what you decide to purchase because they're all so different. But in this case, this one being the Light, so this is the single motor. Obviously, it's not going to be as fast as the dual motor model. That's going to be the higher speed version, which of course is also all-wheel drive, versus this single motor is still a rear-wheel drive model that obviously doesn't have quite the same power and torque and things like that you would get, but it still manages to get up and go. You'll have no problem keeping up with traffic or even managing to go on most hills. However, if you are going to have a fully loaded vehicle, I can say from my experience driving this one with the rear wheel drive, it's got a fair amount of get up and go, but I still think that if you're going to have a fully loaded vehicle, let's say you've got a bigger family, I think you will find yourself struggling on certain hills if the vehicle's fully loaded, in which case you'll definitely want to consider going with the dual motor model because that'll give you more of that acceleration and power that you'll need in those circumstances, because the single motor I just don't think is quite going to be enough if you're always hauling your family. That being said, if it's just you most of the time and you're looking for an SUV to have that practicality when you need it and don't need it all the time, the single motor is a great option, especially this one. Getting the extended range tends to make that a much better value option because the long range gets the bigger battery from the dual motor version, but only has a single motor, therefore it actually has a longer range, which is also fairly impressive. So that's one of those things where you have to pick and choose what your priorities are. If range is a must for you, then obviously this light long range version makes a lot more sense as opposed to the dual motor versions, especially based on what you decide to carry. With that, it's a fairly simple look. It's such a quiet vehicle, even driving next to trucks on the freeway. Everything is so quiet in the car as well, and that's not even using the sound system of the car, but that it goes a lot into the just engineering quality. Everything just feels solid as well. The steering wheel feels nice. The chairs are actually really comfortable. If anything, they feel like pseudo couches, and it's just a very pleasurable experience to have in the car at the end of the day. So I really have to give Kia a pat on the back for this. This is actually really impressive with everything they managed to do. And it's just a phenomenal, easy to use vehicle. If you like anything to do with EVs, it's one of the facts that they're just so simple to use and anybody can really take advantage and just enjoy driving an EV from point A to point B. So in conclusion, the Kia EV9 is not just an EV Telluride. It's got its own different platform that is pushing the Kia EV lineup forward, and it goes much beyond that. It includes a lot of upgraded luxuries that you won't find in the Telluride, but it does even better than that, as it brings the price down from what you'll find from a lot of the more expensive vehicles such as the Rivian R1S that sit in a similar space in terms of offering a 3-row SUV, but a significantly higher price. Versus here, we have a starting price of around $55,000 that works its way up to about $75,000 for the top-of-the-line dual-motor version, which is, yes, still a bit more expensive. It is more expensive than the Mach-E and the Model Y, but those don't provide the same bigger, let's say, full 3-row SUV experience, as the third row in those isn't really usable in those cars the way it is here with the Kia EV9. And that's a very impressive vehicle. It drives very smoothly. You have a lot of easy to use functions in here that'll make you feel right at home and are very easy to use at the end of the day. So with that, if you're interested in checking out the Kia EV9, I strongly suggest you head over here even to Courtesy Kia. Shout out to them for helping provide the vehicle for today, where you can take a look at the Kia EV9 or even think about ordering one or test driving one for yourself. So with that, that's going to be the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed it, hit that like button for me. I'd really appreciate it. And consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.